Hello and welcome. It's time to put the finishing touches on our app. In this video, we're going to incorporate sound effects into the app. And we're also going to add some logic so that when our card model generates the 8 pairs of cards, we only want unique pairs. All right, let's get started. We're going to start by adding sounds, but before we can, we need to actually import the sound effect files into the Xcode project. So right below the lesson, you're going to find all of the sound files in a zip. So go ahead, download that, unzip it, and you're going to have these 4 sounds here. This represents flipping of a card, this represents a match, no match, and then shuffling in the beginning when all the cards are laid out. So before you drag these into Xcode, actually, there's one thing that we can do to help organize these sound files. We can go into our project, right-click here and choose New Group. And this is basically going to create a new folder for us to add these sound files just to keep them together. So we're going to call them sounds, and then now go ahead and drag these 4 files into that sound group. One thing though, I want to make sure that in this pop-up dialog that shows up, I want you to make sure that copy items if needed is checked, because that is going to ensure that a copy of those sound files are going to be copied into your project directory, and this helps keep all of your project assets together. If you uncheck this, it's just going to reference those files wherever you downloaded them on your hard drive, and if you accidentally delete them, then those references will be broken. So I always recommend to copy them into your project folder. And also you want to make sure that this target is checked, and this is going to make sure that those sound files gets copied into the app bundle along with your app code. And that app bundle together forms that package that gets deployed on your phone or gets uploaded to the App Store. So it's really important that you indicate you want these sound files, these assets, included into your app bundle. So click Finish, and there we are. You can go ahead and click on them and play them just so you can see what they sound like. All right, now the way we're going to play these sound files is to use a class supplied by Apple called AVAudioPlayer. Now this class is actually in a different framework called AVFoundation, which is responsible for all of the audio-visual stuff. So while we could create a new AVAudioPlayer object here in the view controller, I want to keep those that sort of task separate from the view controller. And we're going to create a brand new class called SoundManager just to manage all of the sound capabilities of this app. That way, if we know something's wrong with the sound, we know where to look. And also, if we want to use that SoundManager for a different project in the future, we have all of that SoundManager code in one place. So let's go ahead and create a new class. So in the Match app right here, I'm going to choose New File. And we're going to choose Swift File, not CodeWithChris class, because we're not subclassing anything. So go ahead, choose Swift File, and I'm going to call this the SoundManager. Then I'm going to move this guy up here so it's not all the way down there by its lonely self. The first thing we're going to want to do is to import the AVFoundation framework. As I told you, the AVAudioPlayer class is inside this framework, and if we want to use it and to have Xcode recognize that class, we need to import AVFoundation so we can use all of its classes. Now we're going to declare the SoundManager class, just like that. And let's create a property to hold the actual AVAudioPlayer object. So this one is going to be var audio player, and it's going to be a type of AVAudioPlayer, and it's going to be optional now. The reason is because later on we're going to initialize this audio player property to whatever sound file it wants to play. So that's why I'm not creating a new audio player object right now and assigning it to this. Next, we're going to create a method that people can call when they want to play a sound. So I'm going to call this simply play sound. And to indicate which sound that they want to play, I'm going to make it a parameter to specify the sound that they want to play, rather than creating a separate method for every single sound. So this way it's a lot more scalable and it's a lot more efficient. You don't have to repeat code. Now the question is, what parameter do we put in here to indicate the sound that they want to play? Well, one idea is that you could simply put a string in there, make it a string parameter, and they have to specify the sound file name. While that solution would work, there's actually a better solution. This is where I want to introduce something to you called enumerations, or enum for short. And it's something that you've actually been using already. If you go into the view controller, I can give you this example right here. In this line of code for the run loop, for this parameter in particular, for the mode, remember I told you when we hit dot here and we took a look at the different values that this could be? This is an enum right here. So as you can see, there are 3 different values that you can choose. And that's exactly what an enum is. It's a data type where it can be one of multiple values, and those values, that set of values, you specify. So for the mode enum, you can choose common, default, or tracking. So that's what we're going to do with our SoundManager. We're going to create an enum that represents the sound effect, and it can be one of these 4 sound files right here. So let me show you how you create your own enum data type. So we're going to do that right here using the enum keyword, and I'm going to call this sound effect, and then you open up a pair of curly brackets, and for each value that sound effect enum can be, you use the case keyword, and then you give it a name. So I'm going to just shorten these file names here. I'm going to call card flip. I'm just going to make this flip. Correct is standing for a match, so I'm going to call that match. Wrong, ding wrong, it sounds like what you would play when there's no match, so that's what I'm going to put there. And then the last one is shuffle. I'm just going to keep that as a shuffle. So just like that, we've created our own enum data type that can be one of these 4 values. And that's what I'm going to use as a parameter to be passed in here. So I'm going to call this effect, and I'm going to make that parameter type sound effect. So now let's go into the view controller and let's call the play sound method and pass in the different sounds that we would want to play. Let's figure out in which places do we want to play these sounds. Well, inside the view controller, in the view did load, we'd want to play the shuffle sound right here, right when the cards get displayed. So play shuffle sound. Actually, there's a better place that we can play this sound. There's another method in this view controller lifecycle that we can play the sound at instead, because in the view did load method, the view's loaded into memory, but it's not necessarily shown on the screen just yet. So instead, there's another one we can override called view did appear, and in this method, it's going to be called as soon as the elements start showing up on the screen for the user. So I'm going to play the shuffle sound here actually. So in order to play the shuffle sound, we're going to have to create a new instance of the SoundManager. So why don't we go up here and let's create var sound player. I don't want to call it the exact same thing as the class name. And this is a type of SoundManager, and I'm just going to create a brand new SoundManager. So actually, in that case, we don't have to explicitly declare that data type. All right, so in here, we're just going to say SoundPlayer.play sound, and the effect, you can see that the data type like that, you can just hit dot, and then we can choose one of the 4 enum values. So this one is going to be shuffle. I want to play that sound effect. So I'm just going to copy this code actually and take a look at where else I would want to play sounds. What else have we got? A card flip, right? So in the did select item, this is when a card gets selected and we flip up a card. We're going to want to play that sound along with this flip up animation. So let's play, I'm just going to say play sound. And for this one, we're going to want to play the flip sound, right? And in the game logic methods, check for match. If it's a match, we're going to want to play the match sound. And if it's not a match, we're going to want to play the no match sound. All right, so I think those are the places we'd want to play the sound effects. Now we have to go back to the play sound method, and we actually have to implement this code. We have to look at what got passed in and then decide which file should be played here. So why don't I create a variable called soundFileName, because that is going to dictate which of these WAV files we play. It's going to be empty. Here, I can use an if statement to just check what got passed in, whether it's a flip, match, no match, or shuffle. But however, there is something called a switch statement, which is really great for taking a look at a value and then depending on what it is, do something different for each case that it could be. So since our effect could be one of these four, it's a perfect use for the switch statement. If you ever find yourself using an if statement and you have a whole bunch of different else if branches, you could potentially use a switch statement. Let me show you how this works. So you have the switch keyword, and actually autocomplete is going to be a savior for us. So let's just double click that and I can explain to you this boilerplate code that Xcode just created for us. So you're switching on a particular variable or value, and that for us is going to be this parameter that got passed in. So I'm going to put that here. So we're switching on effect. Now, inside these curly brackets, you're going to put all of the different cases effect could be, and then a different piece of code for each case that it could be. So let me just demonstrate what I mean here. So ignore the default keyword right now. So we have case, right? And the pattern, I guess, is what it matches, right, would be flip, and then the code if effect was flip. Like if it is this case, then what do you want to run? Well, if the effect is flip, then I want to set the file name to card flip. I'm going to leave out the .wav part because later on we're going to indicate that in another way. There are three other cases. So case, match, right? Sound file name is going to be ding correct. Case no match, sound file name is going to be ding wrong, and case dot shuffle is going to be sound file name dot or sound file name equals shuffle. Now default happens when, oh, actually I'm missing the colons here. That's right. Now default is the code that gets run when none of these cases are true. But knowing that this is an enum, it has to be one of these four. The problem is you have to always specify default. In this case, I'm just going to indicate an empty string if it doesn't match any of those four. Default will never be executed. See, it knows. So if it's an enum, I guess I might not have to specify it if it's an enum, because you can use the switch on any sort of variable, not just an enum. It could be a string, it could be an integer, it could be anything. And in that case, I think you're going to have to specify a default. Since Xcode is smart enough to realize that effect is of type sound effect, and it knows there's only four cases here, and I've covered all four, then I don't have to specify the default case, which is great. One thing I do want to do, and this is personal preference, I usually like to indent these guys so that it's one level, oops, wrong button, one level like that. You can do that by highlighting that and pressing Command and right square bracket, or even here, indent, Shift right, Shift left. This is useful if you highlight all of your code and hit re-indent. It's going to indent everything nicely for you. And just in case you have mismatching brackets or your code is a mess. So just highlight everything, choose re-indent, and it's going to line up everything nicely for you according to the default, the way that Xcode thinks it should be. It's saying that I have an extra curly bracket. I wonder if that's true. Switch this one. I don't think that's true. What? It's kind of strange. Let me just double check what I have here. So I have this one matches this one. You know what? This is a perfect case. Let me just highlight all of my code here. Let me go to structure, re-indent, and it still seems to think I have, oh, you know why? Oh, wait a minute. This one matches this one matches this one matches this one. I think this should be right. Let me command B to build it. So build succeeded. So Xcode is just trolling me. All right, moving on. Okay, so we've set the sound file name. Next, we have to get the file path to the actual wave file. Because imagine, when you deploy your app into your phone or you publish it to the store, the sound effects get packaged together along with your code and everything else into this app bundle. And so you need to find the file path to the sound file within your app bundle. And there's an easy way to do that using the bundle class. So we're going to look at the main bundle, and we're going to say path for resource of type returns the full path name for the resource identified by the name and the file extension. So by passing in the sound file name and passing in .wave, this is going to look inside the app bundle and give us the file path for that file. And we're going to have to assign this. Let me just assign it to a constant like this. Now keep in mind that this could return nil if it can't find that resource. So we have to check. So let's see, get the path to the resource. Check that it's not nil. And this is where I can also show you the guard statement. So let me just show you the usual if way first. So you can say if bundle path is nil, then couldn't find the resource, exit. And so you could just like return, because we can't do anything if it can't find the sound file, right? Another way to write this, used specifically to protect yourself against certain scenarios, is a guard statement. So let's just hit enter here. So it's guarding against a certain condition, otherwise do something. So to show you what that means is, I want to guard against bundle path. Guard bundle path is not equal nil, else return. So this is basically saying that make sure the bundle path is not equal to nil, otherwise return. This statement and this statement, they serve the same purpose. Functionally, they're the same. The reason you would use the guard statement is that when you're reading your code and you see guard, in your head, you know that it's a check just to make sure things are okay before proceeding. Whereas an if statement could be used for anything. So a guard statement is really clear that this is a sort of sanity check to make sure that everything is great before we move on. So that's what I'm going to use there. And I'm going to get rid of this. So now that we have the bundle path, we need to actually put it into a URL object. Now this represents, as you guessed, a URL. And the reason we have to do this is because when we create a new AVAudioPlayer object, it expects us to pass in a URL object to that resource. Because this bundle path is just a string. Like this just returns a string representing the file path to that resource. We actually need to create a URL object, file URL with path, where you can pass in the string as a string path. So we're going to pass in the bundle path here. And I'm going to force unwrap it because, as I told you, this could be nil, and so that makes this an optional string. The thing is, we've checked that it isn't nil here, and so I can safely force unwrap it, knowing that there actually is a string object in here representing the path to this resource right here. All right, so that's how we're going to create this new URL object, and I'm going to assign it to a constant called URL, and then I'm going to set our audio player property. I'm going to create a new AVAudioPlayer object, and there is this contents of URL. notice that there is this throws keyword here. And this means that you trying to create a new AVAudioPlayer object could potentially throw an error. Now, why would it throw an error? Throw is just another keyword for raising an error, and then you're gonna have to handle it. Otherwise, your app is gonna crash. The reason why it may throw up an error is because there are so many parts where this can fail, right? You could not find the resource. You might not be able to create a URL object from here. When you pass that guy in, you might not actually get that sound file. So contents of, we're going to pass in that URL object right there. And let me show you how you handle a method or creating an object that can throw an error. As you see right here, Xcode is complaining it can throw, but it is not marked with the try and the error is not handled. So Xcode makes sure that you properly handle that error. The way we do that is we have to use a couple of different keywords here. So you have to use the do keyword, and then you have to open up a pair of curly brackets, and you have to move the line which throws inside that do block. Next, on the line that throws, you also have to use the try keyword, as in you're trying to do this, right? So that's where the two keywords come, try and do. You are trying to do this, which is creating a new AV player. And then the next one, so the next keyword we have to use is the catch keyword. And that's what we do down here. So the idea is that executing or trying this line of code may throw an error, and down here we catch that error if there is. So that's kind of the story element behind it. We are trying to do this, which may throw an error. If it does throw an error, then we're going to come down here and we're going to catch it and do something with it. So this is called error handling. And it gives us basically a graceful way to handle an error so that our app doesn't crash or the end user doesn't see something they're not supposed to see. So this allows us to gracefully handle any errors. In this case, we're probably just going to print couldn't create an audio player, which is the truth. And we're just going to use the return keyword to exit this function because we can't do anything further. Now, that's basically it to creating an audio player that points to a sound file. The second thing we have to do, and I sometimes even forget this, is to play the sound by calling the play method on the audio player. Well, you know soon enough because your sound file isn't gonna play, right? Play the sound effect. So why don't we launch our project now? I think that should be it, because on the view controller side, so there's the shuffle, there's the card flip sound, that's a wrong, so this would be a match. All right, and sorry, better luck next time. Yeah, I thought so. We're still able to tap on cards after this timer has gone to 0, so we need to fix that. And that's a really easy fix. In viewController.Swift, in the did select item, all right, this is when the collection view detects that the user tapped the cell and it calls this method here. We're going to want to check if there's any time remaining. Don't let the user interact if the time is 0. So we're going to say if milliseconds is less than or equal to 0, then simply return. And that's not going to execute any of the code below. I'm not going to let them flip cards or match cards or anything like that. All right, so I think that does it from a sound effect perspective. The second thing we wanted to address here is in the card model, we want to have unique pairs only. So I alluded to how to do this early on in this module, and now we're going to actually implement it. The idea is that we're going to have a second array just to keep track of which numbers have already been selected. And whenever we generate a new random number, we're going to check that array to see if we've generated that number before? If we have, we're going to loop again and keep trying until we get all of the numbers we need that are unique. So declare an empty array to store numbers that we've generated. So var, I'll just call this generated numbers equals an int. And then down here, whenever we generate a random number, we're just going to want to see if generated numbers dot contains the random number, then we're going to want to skip it. So we're actually we want the reverse of this, right? If generated numbers dot contains random number is false, as in this number doesn't exist, then we're going to want to execute this code. So let's indent this code right here. Add them to the array. Add this number to the list of generated numbers. So the next time when we get this number again, we'll know, and we're not going to run this code to create the cards for this particular number. So generated numbers dot, we can just append it, append random number. All right. Now the problem that we're going to face right now is that looping this 8 times may not get us 8 unique numbers. It's more likely that we're not going to get 8 unique numbers just in 8 tries. So we actually have to use a different loop. And you've learned about the repeat while and the while loop, right? So the repeat while loop is going to execute this code at least once and then check if it should loop again. Whereas the while loop is going to check the condition first. So in here, we can use either, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to use the while loop. So while generated numbers is less than, let's see here. If it's less than, generated numbers dot count. Right, if it's less than 8, we're going to want to run this code again. So as long as we don't have 8 unique numbers, we're going to loop this again. So I think that is correct. We're going to run it right now. Our random numbers are printed here, so we can double check if they're unique or not. So we have 9, 3, 10, 8, 7, 1, 4, 2. Here, run it again. 8, 1, 5, 9, 11, 13. And I mean, I'm just eyeballing it, but it looks like this is working to me. And do we have 16 cards? We have 8 pairs, right? Yeah, we have 8 numbers here. So they should all be unique cards. Congratulations, you've completed the Match app. You've learned a lot in this module, including how to use the MVC design pattern, how to use custom classes, how to use collection views, delegates, and protocols. You learned how to use the Xcode debugging tools and how to troubleshoot your own project. And you learned some best practices in terms of organizing your Xcode project and documenting your code. You also learned how to use alerts and timers in your projects. And best of all, you did all of this while building a tangible app. You're making amazing progress so far, and there's a lot more exciting things to learn. So I'll see you in the next module.